My name is Helena Washington, and I have been in the field of behavioral health for nearly 30 years. I crossed over into the area of addiction 26 years ago, this month, actually. Next week will be my 26th year anniversary working within the addiction arena. My career started in Toledo, Ohio. In counseling from Bowling Green State University, also in Ohio. My focus today, I would like to speak, I do a great deal of presentations on diversity and having conversations on how to best service individuals that we may not be comfortable with or familiar with. I try to do my best to break the barriers in providing services and offering further insight and conversations, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. This topic today is understanding the Black Indigenous experience, further insight into the past, present, and future of behavioral health. The objectives for today are understanding some brief historical factors, foundations of the mental health care system here within the United States and just in the Western world, inequities, meaning moving beyond micro and macro aggressions, dialogue and implementation, creating safe spaces for healing. Some historical factors. The picture that you see here, I proudly will say that is the indigenous tribe that I am from. I was born in Monrovia, Liberia, West Africa, and I came to America as a child. Both of my parents are African from two different tribes. And what that means for me, the tribe of my mom's family, the Crew, they're one of the main strongest warrior tribes, meaning when the colonizers were coming into our country, our tribe was the tribe that fought them off, and they would have rather killed themselves versus being put into slavery. With that also being the case, my country is the only country that was not colonized. One of the only countries that was not colonized was the only country not colonized in Africa. And it's just a historical proud fact. But when we take a look at the historical factors of slavery and what that means to African Americans, indigenous people from Africa, that's significant. I know I hear a lot of dialogue, we hear videos, we hear social media chatter. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of insensitive information that is out there because individuals don't like to talk about these sensitive topics as to why we are in the position that we are today. The other issue also is, you know, I think you all hear some of the chatter about changing the curriculums in school to change how, you know, history is presented. And I really implore you not to do that to your children. They need to understand certain facts in order to prepare themselves to interact with people that are different from them, regardless of where these individuals may come from within the United States. Black people and other indigenous people of color had natural ways of healing when we talk about our behavioral health needs, our mental health. What was the disruptor? Slavery was one of the disruptors. Colonization, meaning the loss of culture, traditions, Eurocentrism, forced religion. Throughout Africa, there was always, you know, there's the belief in God, but Christianity was not a traditional religion throughout the continent of Africa. There was a lot of ancestral praying. There were a lot of spiritual pieces. That's another part of the presentation that we really cannot get into right now. But when people lose their culture, their traditions, you know, their identity is tainted. You know, certain factors are lost. And those are some of the things that we're still dealing with that lead into the generational scars, the transformations, within the Black community that we still deal with now. And then, of course, capitalism. When we talk about capitalism, there were ways, in the early, the turn of the century after slavery, post-Civil War, I'll say, looking at capitalism, how can we make money off of the freed slaves? How can we make money, taking a look at controlling, the slave codes. And these are resources that I will provide to you. When you take a look at the slave code and the part where it looks at alcohol purchasing and the use of alcohol, once there were ways to show that we can capitalize and make money, we're going to figure out a way how we can do that and also keep them, keep the chains, attached to them a little longer, for lack of a better term. The foundations rooted in racism and white supremacy is where a lot of the theoretical perspectives and practices come from. And I want to talk about this briefly. The American Psychiatric Association, National Association for Social Workers, NASW, and the American Psychological Association recently released apologies to Black people for their foundation, the way things were done, the way their theoretical and systems were created. For example, even when I talk about these three pieces, I'm talking across the board right now when I speak about healthcare in general, the way Black people have been treated with surgery, thinking, we don't need anesthesia, we can handle pain. Our brains are supposedly different. That is how the American Psychiatric Association started developing modalities and treatment models based on inaccuracies. All of those things come from the suppression, the oppression of Black people in slavery and coming out of slavery. A lot of those belief systems transitioned, and we see it now politically. We see it within our criminal justice systems. We also see it, within our educational systems. When we take a look at these theoretical perspectives and practices across the board, we see it in our places of business, because these things have trickled outside of taking a look at our healthcare and our behavioral healthcare in general. Black people feel the same pain. You cut us, you stab us, we're gonna bleed, we hurt. When we take a look at how, we're having issues right now with individuals trusting the healthcare system. And the other day I was watching something, I don't remember what it was in passing, but I heard a doctor mention you have to understand and respect people's fears and lack of trust when it comes to the healthcare system within the United States or within the Western world. That is why we have so many, people who are struggling and contemplating or rejecting the vaccination right now for COVID. There's a lot of theories behind it, but there's a significant lack of trust. A very known fact, let's talk about the Tuskegee experiment. Behaviors and practices similar to the Tuskegee experiment has taken place when it comes to brain care. And I would like to speak about that further in various ways when we take a look at this. And if there are any questions, Jade and Eric, if someone has a question, because I'm used to doing presentations, having dialogue with the audience, and I have not perfected Zoom 100% because I love my interaction with the audience. I love having the conversations. So if there are any questions, and if you need to interject, just let me know.
That'll be great. And feel free to use the Q&A box down at the bottom, and we'll help you with those questions when they come through. So.
Thank you. Okay. I want to focus briefly on when we talk about the history of substance use disorder and where we are today. Let's go back to where some of the roots started. Empirical fact, clinical and empirical research has shown, and of course, again, I said I will, provide those resources for you, has shown that alcoholism was not something that, Indigenous people from Africa dealt with. That is not something that was an issue. alcoholism with Black people began when we were colonized and brought over to the Western world. There is absolutely no empirical or clinical research to show that it existed prior to that. And with that being the case, I want to talk about someone who I don't think a lot of people knew was in recovery. And what recovery meant back then is much different than what we see today. And I do wish some of the modalities that Frederick Douglass and you know, the groups of people who started that movement, I wish a lot of those things were risen to prominency here, because I really believe that it could help the Black community. The Black community's needs are different. Many people, you know, I had someone who made a comment to me. She was a clinical social worker. She said, what difference does it make if someone needs therapy if the person is Black or male or female? And I said, it makes a huge difference if someone feels as though they have not been heard, their needs have not been met, or they're not understood. And of course, if they've been abused clinically. We have a lot of individuals who suffer from religious abuse and clinical abuse. And what am I speaking of when I make comments to this capacity? When you have challenges that exist and you go to someone who may not look like you, as far as some of the challenges, I'll use some of the things that we know are going on today that you may even see on social media or, you know, in certain TV shows or documentaries. You know, someone said, is it racist to have that hashtag Black Girl Magic? A lot of these things that we're seeing nowadays is to keep our community uplifted because of the continual suppression. The psychological impact of the continuation of the suppression. And again, I'm going back to one of the things we see now. They're trying to change the curriculum in school, you know, not teaching about the facts of where we are today, of how those things happen. You know, it's not about being racist when you hear Black Lives Matter. You know, there's a significance behind it. It doesn't mean other people don't matter. That's not what that means. It's talking about the equality. It's talking about the continuation. I'm going to share something with you. Black people live with trauma every single day. We deal with PTSD every single day. Watching the news. When our children go to suburban schools, how are they going to be treated? How are we treated in the workplace? Are we going to be pulled over by the police for, you know, some random unfair reason just because maybe we were profiled? And I'm not saying that when crimes are committed, that individuals should not suffer or experience the consequences to that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the inequities that continue to take place continually. When we go back to pre-Civil War and post-Civil War, and we take a look at the historical factors and the psychological imprints that those things have been passed down generation to generation, the reason those things do not go away is because we're dealing with them every single day. Why are we still having conversations about a Voting Rights Act? Why has that never been put into law federally? Those are some of the things that are very, very heart-wrenching. And it also causes a lot of scarring to resurface. Why are we still dealing with this? People lost their lives. When you talk about the Pettus Bridge, when they crossed it for people to vote, why are we still having that conversation in 2021? Those are some of the raw facts that keep us in a position of staying, you know, in a state of uncertainty, fear. Where is this going? On January 6th, for the first time in this country, a lawmaker said it was like a regular day of visitation at the state capitol. Something's wrong with that picture. Something is wrong. Okay, so these are some of the things that keep us in that state of PTSD and trauma. Our children, are they going to be treated, you know, fairly? Are they going to come home? I'm tired of us being hashtagged. I'm tired of it. But because of what we see in the media constantly, it's not just do what the police say. Sometimes you want to know, why am I pulled over? It's not about being combative all the time. It's Simple questioning. Why am I being pulled over? Why are you responding this way to me? Help me understand. You asked me to get my driver's license. I'm getting it. Why are you shooting me? Philando Castillo, you know, when I bring that name up because we talk about, you know, everyone saw that man murdered and died on social media. We all saw that in front of his child. And why do I bring that up? We have certain laws in place, but do they really pertain? Do Black people still benefit from those laws? He had a license to have a concealed weapon, and he told the officer he had it. He did not reach for it. He was trying to take care of what the officer asked. He was shot in front of his child without incident. Okay, so those are some of the things that when I talk about the psychological impact of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis, it just never ends. It's even to the point where, and personally, you know, I don't watch the news as often because I get tired of it. You know, I get tired of the pain and the tears. So I want to bring it back to where we are here, taking a look at Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was one of the most prominent and outspoken Black people in recovery. Many people did not know Frederick Douglass was in recovery. And he was a freed slave. He was an abolitionist. He was a social reformer. But one of the things when we're talking about the topic, he believed that the use of alcohol for slaves and freedmen would hinder liberation. It would keep them down. It would not allow them to rise to the occasion of being the best that they could be. And here is something I really want us to take a look at. Really briefly, Douglass openly talked about a period of intemperance in his life, signed a pledge of abstinence in 1845, maintaining sobriety for the rest of his life, and worked to promote Black temperance groups. Abstinence groups, that's what that means, the temperance, you know, the Black abstinent groups. Douglass saw sobriety as a prerequisite for liberation and full citizenship. Through his encouragement and example, 19th century African Americans generated their own temperance and mutual aid societies, example, the Black Templars. And I know we spend a lot of time talking about the history of AA and Dr. Bob and Bill W., which we all know AA is phenomenal. But before AA existed, African Americans had their own systems to support one another to make sure that they were continuing to keep their people liberated because of the injustices that were still taking place. These societies and their pledges frame sobriety within the historical and cultural context of the post-Civil War years. This is important. His word, being mercifully redeemed from human slavery, we do pledge ourselves never to be brought into slavery of a bottle. Therefore, we will not drink the drunkard's drink, which whiskey, gin, beer, nor rum, nor anything that makes drunk come. That's significant. That is significant in the fact the support within the Black community. Back then, they were not called, you know, African Americans, Black people. Because of the fact they were still connected to their African roots. It's just been over the years, you know, taking a look at coming further into the 1900s, moving towards the civil rights movement, coming past that, coming into the 70s, we had the crack cocaine epidemic of the 80s, the 90s. Now we're dealing with an opiate issue. So when we take a look at what that significant measure, you know, that Frederick Douglass started with his group of abstinent individuals, that is significant. And I want us to remember, and if you have never heard this before, I would like for you to take a further delve into it. Because when we take a look, some people have told me in the past, you know, AA, I'm just not connecting to AA. I am not against other groups, other modalities, formats that really formally keep you sober. If it's allowing you to live a life of recovery, whether it's substance use disorder, or if it's a co-occurring challenge with your mental health and substance use disorder, or any other physical ailment that you may be dealing with when we talk about co-occurring disorders or challenges, I really want you to delve a little further in understanding this, maybe by understanding the historical factors of helping Black people or African Americans with sobriety and recovery, taking a look at some of the things that worked in the past. Maybe some of those things could be implemented to help moving forward. Just something to think about. I want to move into Pan-Africanism. Some people will call this the Marcus Garvey movement, and I want to explain the significance of this flag. The purpose of the Pan-African movement, the basic explanation of it is to uplift, to understand there are standards. There's a foundation of pride. They wanted people, Black people, because of slavery, because of the denigration, because of the continual oppression, because of the traumatic experiences that were still going on, and because of how mental health was treated, and I'm going to speak about that briefly, the historical pieces behind that, because of how mental health was treated, you know, the affliction of mental illness, when it bled into the communities, there were many times where there was no mental illness, but because of the traumatic experiences that Black people were continually experiencing, the reactiveness, if anyone sees their loved one hung from a tree, if someone is sleeping, excuse me, and a bomb comes through, you know, a Molotov cocktail comes through your window and your house catches on fire, if someone's burning a cross, if your children are being abused, tormented, or tortured in school, those things are going to become traumatic experiences. But as a result, if anyone were to speak up, or if anyone was to have a reaction to that, the fear, the pain, the depression, the anxieties that came along with that. And then let's move into the fact within Black communities, if you all take a look at some of the historical, the lengthier training to this topic, if you go back, African American and Black communities did not have liquor stores. That was not the foundation of the Black community. The Black community's foundation was rooted in faith. The Black community was you know, looking at the African understanding and modality of a village. I'll even use my community when I grew up in Toledo. You know, my earliest memories, I grew up in North Toledo in an area called Point Place. That is the foundation of where I grew up. That is what I call my foundation. Very diverse community, but there were things that we did see and experience, you know, that I can think back on. But I do remember, if I did something down Dahlia Drive and I came back to Dahlia Circle, my dad and my mom knew what, you know, I may have done that I wasn't supposed to do, or, you know, I was around certain people, or I wasn't allowed to go into people's houses, but sometimes I would go into someone's house to go watch TV or play. I would get in trouble for that. Before I even got home, they knew. That is the village approach. Now we are really, really pushing the village approach, because with social media and with all of the hashtags, the painful hashtags that we are seeing now, we do need a village approach. And that's not just for the African American community. I like when, you know, certain approaches, you know, can be a little bit more diverse, because I think it broadens the spectrum of understanding and forming bonds outside of your natural environment that also helps you to communicate better, you know, lessens your fears and those apprehensions you may have with other people who are different from you. So when we talk about Pan-Africanism, or some people, as I said, would like to call it the Marcus Garvey movement, they started calling it that. Number one, he was a prominent, you know, figure in pushing it. Marcus Garvey, and I'm not here to talk about just Marcus Garvey and Frederick Douglass, but the significance is understanding the African American flag and the Pan-African flag, what the red means. You all saw a lot of these flags when Juneteenth became a federal holiday recently. It's something that I have always recognized, and I recognize that it's not to take away from July 4th. That is not years, right here in Texas. So when I talk about this flag, and there's varying, there's variations of this flag. If you look it up, people have turned it into what they need to turn it into. The red stands for the blood that binds, Black people, that flows, the richness, the bond that, the strength of that. The Black stands for the Black skin, the richness, the strength, and the pride of having that brown or Black skin. And the green represents the vast natural wealth that Africa represents, all of the natural resources. Africa is the richest continent on the earth. That's why you see so much colonization that has taken place. All of, from iron ore to gold to even things that are within our cell phones, that for our cell phones to work, minerals from Africa are implemented, are put into our cell phones. There's also another variation of the flag that you may see, gold, and that is the power of the sun and the value of the natural gold. So some of the flags may have that. It's a sense of pride. It's a sense when someone is oppressed for so long, you need something to kind of help uplift you, to let you know you're valuable, okay? I would like to move forward. I know I'm moving a little fast, but if you have any questions, are there any questions yet before I move forward, Eric or Jade?
Not at this time.
Okay. I would like to move into where we are today and how did we get to this place? When we take a look at mental illness and how it was handled before we step into looking at substance use disorder or alcoholism back then, people were, just kind of thrown into Negro institutions, just locked away, whether they were appropriately diagnosed or not. They were just put away, criminalized. And I think across the board, we know mental illness has been criminalized. And that's something that we advocate for on a regular basis, for us to make sure we're not constantly criminalizing addiction and mental illness. Of course, there are situations, because I have touchy conversations with individuals concerning DUIs, but that's another piece when we talk about the, moving forward with how the penal system handles behavioral health. Coming into today, microaggressions. I want to talk about what they are. A microaggression is a common interaction that subtly or unconsciously and unintentionally expresses a prejudice attitude towards a member of a marginalized group, such as a racial minority. Obviously, these sensitive terms came to fruition when we started taking a look at the racial tension going on within the Western world. I had part of the extensive training. I do have videos that show examples of these, and I have some graphs and so forth, taking a look at various things, but they're not here, but I'm going to highlight some of them. A lot of the times they are rooted in, we all know what prejudice is, when you feel as though your race is more superior than another. And also when we talk about microaggressions, it does happen with gender. Women experience it as well. Women experience it, people of color experience it, individuals with lower socioeconomic status experience it as well. According to the American Psychological Association, I want to make this, here we go. According to the American Psychological Association, in 2009, they released these definitions because of the psychological and the psychosocial impact. Micro assaults, they are conscious and intentional actions or slurs, such as using a racial epithet, displaying swastikas, or deliberately serving a white person before a person of color in a restaurant. And many times when these things are spoken of, one of the things I want to use is the angry Black woman syndrome. Because of the fact Black women may express themselves does not mean that they're angry. If they see something that is, unjustly done, or they speak up on something in the workplace, it does not mean that they're angry. yes, we have the right to be angry, just like anybody else in various situations that take place in the world. But with that being the case, you know, having those comments and those things told to us on a regular basis, they're degrading. It's not fair. It's not right. To the point I have dealt with individuals, and I will say something, you know, if I was in line or you walk past me to help someone else that does not look like me, I will say I was here first. I think you may have noticed that I was standing here first. Oh, I'm sorry. And then you deal with an attitude. Because it's a restaurant and I don't want anyone messing with my food, when I feel uncomfortable, I will leave. Because number one, if I'm treated that way, you don't deserve my hard-earned money. We have power in our vote and where we spend our money. And I think individuals need to understand that, instead of saying, you know, things are a little different than individuals, you know, protesting at the counters. You know, when Martin Luther King, you know, was out with the nonviolent movement, you know, and protesting, you know, at the Woolworths, sitting there eating, you know, you're going to serve us, and they were abused. This is a different time. You know, people are tired and exhausted, and people are reacting. People are still, you know, laying their lives on the line in different capacities than what we saw, you know, back during the civil rights movement, because these things are continuing. And the other problem that we have these things. The technology is recording everything. Technology sees everything. And all of these things are thrown in our faces on a daily basis. Micro insults, verbal and nonverbal communications that suddenly convey rudeness and insensitivity and demean a person's racial heritage or identity. For an example, is an employee who asks a colleague of color how she got her job, implying that she may have landed it through some affirmative action or quota system. I do know, you know, and I'm going to say this, you know, there's certain conversations that we have on our end. When I say our end, you know, Black people have conversations and very careful with what they may name their children. Because of the implication when you're applying for a job. You know, there's a lot of names, you know, that are very beautiful, that, you know, extend to the richness of the African-American experience and culture, you know, and some people may make that a middle name. Some individuals, you know, have changed their names as they became more comfortable within their own skin as to who they are, to embrace their African roots, to where they're not worried about the micro insults. But it doesn't take away the fact that they hurt, that they do hurt. You know, one of the things that I often hear, and I know where it comes from, and I have to look at it differently, is when individuals tell me, when I'm doing a lot of my presentations when they're face to face, oh, you speak so well and eloquently. And for me, how else am I supposed to speak? You know, I'm speaking English, you know, I went to school. Do you say that to everyone else? I used to hear it a lot when, you know, someone called it the Obama syndrome, you know, and that was insulting, you know, that you would use that term, you know, because of the stereotypical things that are seen in movies and TV shows, to keep people's mindset negatively looking at Black people. Those things are insulting. And I do want to ask, if you are listening, please don't say that to a Black person, because we don't like it. We don't. We take it for what it is, a micro insult. And I don't think that you actually mean it that way most of the time. Most of the time, I don't think it's meant. Because some of the people who have said it to me, I have worked with them. I've seen them to be good people, caring people, and they're wonderful helping professionals and educators that have said that to me. Micro invalidations, communications that are subtle, exclude, negate, or nullify the thoughts, feelings, and experiential reality of a person of color. For example, people often ask Asian Americans, where were they born, conveying that they are not they're not American, that they're from some foreign land. And I also will share this because some of my other African brothers and sisters, because unless I told you I was Liberian, a lot of people do not know I'm Liberian American. I'm literally African American, for, all purposes. There's a protective shield that you may sense if, as a Black American, when I know someone, West African people can kind of identify other West Africans, whether you're from Nigeria or Ghana. Some of our neighbors, we have a lot of similarities. We have a lot of, little contests and rivalry with our food and so forth. But when I do speak to or see Africans and I'll say, well, where are you from? They'll say, I'm from Africa. Once I say I'm Liberian, the entire energy changes. Oh, I'm from so-and-so, I'm from such and such tribe. The whole conversation changes because of the fact, and this is something I do talk about in the lengthier context of the training, a lot of that changes because of the fact that, and I wish it did not exist, but I do understand where it comes from. The Black Americans and the Africans that have immigrated here, sometimes people seem to think that there's some kind of division, and sometimes that division may be felt. A lot of the times it's because a lot of Africans were not here when the civil rights movement was in place. And I've had conversations with my staff members when I was in other leadership positions. Though, once they're comfortable, they just want to have a little bit more dialogue. They feel Africans turn their nose up to Black Americans. I find that across the board with all cultures that can happen. But part of what you may get, and I'm not trying to make excuses, the examples that I have experienced as a child, I was traumatized. And to the point to where I didn't always share that I was from Africa. When you walked into our home, there were certain things that identified that, from the artwork, the food. I didn't know when I went to certain people's homes, I didn't know what their food was because my parents are African. We ate African food. We ate Liberian food. So, when I would ask certain questions, but the names that I was called, till this day, I'm still trying to understand what an African booty scratcher is, and I know it sounds funny to say, and we can joke about it, but some of those things were very insulting. And I did get that more so from Black Americans, from other cultural groups, whether they were Mexican American or from other European groups. I would be, in positions where I would be asked about, did you ride an elephant all day long? Did the lions and tigers, but as I became an adult, I noticed that's all they show on TV and that's what they teach. So that is where those questions come from, which can be insulting because you get tired of the jokes, you get tired of the mental beat down of trying to explain who you are and helping people understand what your experience is. And also taking a look at how we are similar. I don't care where you come from. Let's look at our similarities as the human experience, exists. This video here is going to actually go into, and I know I'm moving pretty quickly with all of these topics. This video just kind of breaks down where some of the challenges have existed and continue to exist. This is the recent past. This isn't something that occurred, this situation here. I want you to take a look at it. And please, if you have any questions, this book is available. It's called Unspeakable. It's on Amazon. But I want you to take a look at this short video, please.
This week was to have been a turning point in the life of 96-year-old Junius Wilson. For nearly 7 decades, he's been forcibly kept in a North Carolina psychiatric facility, even though he is not mentally ill and never has been.
want to take a second and I want you all to really read what this says here. Just take 1 minute and read everything, these bullet points that have been presented.
I can't imagine what Junius Wilson's life must have been like. But I do know what it means to be deaf and to be Black. To be rejected for the color of your skin and cast aside because you can't hear. You've never heard of Junius Wilson. He wasn't a famous person, and that's why his story is so important.
I think one of my questions was, what sort of diagnosis does he have to be, in a mental hospital? And it was something like phase of life adjustment disorder, which could happen to anybody. And then I found that they had done the castration in the early 30s after he'd been up there a couple of years. And I really thought, this guy's really not mentally ill. He's old and he's deaf. What's wrong with this picture? I thought it was awful.
When John got the records from the hospital and understood what had happened to him, it was like, oh my God, we've got to do something. And then, it was decided to take it public.
The first part of his life up there was snake bit. He was adjudicated criminally insane and put up there because somebody down here said that he was deaf and was incompetent to stand trial.
Finally, a deaf person, a deaf evaluator, connected with Junius and wrote a report. She saw that there was intelligence in his eyes, and she asked him questions. Where's your family from? And he said, Castle Hayne. Is your family alive? And he replied, they're all dead, dead. Gone.
There is inspiration in Mr. Wilson's story of survival, that he did survive. He made human contact and meaningful relationships in a dark, dark place, in a dark, dark time of his life.
Are there any comments? I'd like for you to, if you are interested, to take a further delve into Mr. Wilson's story. Again, his book is the documentary, that little piece in the conversation. There's conversations on YouTube from the author and so forth. But that's just, an example. And I know we're almost done and I want to get through the end, but if there are questions, let me know. I would like for us to have, when we talk about best practices, when we talk about what's next, dialogue and implementation, becoming more knowledgeable of the historical factors, the trauma, the lack of trust and why it exists. Understanding therapeutic modalities. There are social work modalities, and also I was trained as a therapist, the counseling modalities. None of the modalities that we were taught in graduate school had the African-American or Black person in mind. Many of them, when you take a look, a more in-depth look at it, some of the therapeutic modalities, and we don't have time for me to go into which ones they were actually rooted in racism. Developing understanding clarity, the realities within the inequities within our healthcare system and the behaviors that take place. Learning to be more an advocate for your family members, your students, or just, people within your community, and understanding systemic racism exists in every arena. It's a reality. I would love for us to say it doesn't exist, and with certain notions and behaviors that are existing, it may continue because people may be raising their children to continue those thought patterns and those behaviors of harm. Also, having empathy, empathetic to what it is to be tired. It's exhausting. It's exhausting continually being strong. Some of the conversations that you'll hear clinically, when you talk about Black people, when they're having these group conversations, and there's been documentaries on ABC and CNN and various, Netflix and so forth. There's many documentaries out there that are discussing these challenges. It's exhausting. It's painful and it hurts. And also, how do we get to a point where we are creating safe spaces for healing? I think that, yes, we need to heal, but I think that all of us need to heal because these things have impacted us and it's tainted the way we all think, how we respond, and what we expect from other people. All of us are impacted by the behaviors of history. All of us, regardless of what you look like. As I end, we all know this wonderful artist, Nina Simone. Nina Simone struggled with bipolar disorder. And I say struggled because it did hinder her in many ways. She came from abuse, and she also really wanted to help liberate Black people. And she actually lived in Liberia for a portion of her life. And she was, pretty stable there, and some things took place to where she started to where her mania kind of took over. But it, very, very interesting, strong advocate, artist, very talented. Due to oppression, she had to find another way to express her art and creativity. But I would like to end with this very short video.
I think what you're trying to ask is why am I so insistent upon giving out to them that Blackness, that Black power, that Black pushing them to identify with Black culture? I think that's what you're asking. I have no choice over it. In the first place, to me, we are the most beautiful creatures in the whole world. Black people. I mean, and I mean that in every sense, outside and inside. And to me, we have a culture that is surpassed by no other civilization, but we don't know anything about it. So again, I think I've said this before in the same interview. I think at some time before, my job is to somehow make them curious enough or persuade them by hook or crook to get more aware of themselves and where they came from and what they are into and what is already there, and just to bring it out. This is what compels me to compel them. And I will do it by whatever means necessary. When I'm finished working, as tired as I am, and my work completely takes all my energy, unfortunately. But when there are kids who come backstage afterwards who want to talk or who are moved to the point, sometimes they're moved to tears, I want to know more about it, and they shake my hand and they kiss me and they want to talk about their problems, I find the time to do so as much as I can. I discourage breakfasts and speeches because I don't make speeches, but I will go out of my way, in spite of the fact that I'm too tired to do it, to talk to them at least for 5 minutes or so, to sock to them the same message that I just finished doing on stage, and perhaps to hear some of their grievances, or just to make them feel that they're not alone. Because when you have a few colored kids in a huge white college, anywhere you cut it, they are alienated and they feel it. So when I come, I feel a responsibility. They're so glad to see me because I represent something to them, and I can't give them enough. You know, they need me. They need me, and when I'm needed, I have to give. I curse myself afterwards for having no voice usually, and being so exhausted that I can't do anything for myself. But when they need me for, and the most important thing is they are our future. It's an investment as far as I am concerned. When I invest time in young people from colleges, I know that I'm going to get that bread back. You know, bread cast upon the water comes back. Because when I see them doing their thing one day and I'm too old to do anything but sit and look at them, I'm going to say, well, I was part of that. I never intend for my children to look at me and be ashamed and say, Mama, why didn't you do something? I will have done mine. Pathways of my...
I want to thank you all. And I also want you to know that I will provide books. I will provide links, articles to help anyone who would like to further discuss or learn, delve, further into this conversation. There's many books that I own: Culturally Responsive Teaching of the Brain, Understanding Mental Illness, focusing on the African American experience. When I take a look at Black Pain with someone who was one of my mentors, Terry Williams, and also one of the books that has absolutely nothing to do with therapy that I do recommend adding to your list is Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. And these are materials that I would ask anyone to utilize just to strengthen and further your understanding, especially if you're talking about becoming a more culturally sensitive and competent therapist. Any questions before we log off? And I want to thank you all for your time today. You are much appreciated. And again, Clearfork Academy, I am the clinical outreach manager, and we treat adolescent males ages 13 to 17, and which also we have a wonderful school through UT Health. I would love to speak further with you about Clearfork Academy. My direct contact is there, my email and my phone number. Again, I thank you very much for your time today. You're appreciated.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation, Helena. That was great. Good information and kind of emotional at some parts. So we appreciate that. And we appreciate Clearfork Academy. Good place to represent.
Thank you.
Organization. I put in the chat box that everybody will get a link or an email tomorrow with a link to go to the evaluation and print off your certificate. had to rebuild that, and Brooke's working on that. So we'll have that done tomorrow. And if you called in, if you dialed in, you may not get that email. So reach out to us and let us know, and we'll get that to you. There were actually a couple questions. I think a few people were asking about resources, specifically for the AA and Al-Anon groups that kind of focus on the Black community. Would you have anything like that?
What I recommend when you take a look at AA and NA meetings, the community that I grew up, my career grew up in, there are more focused meetings and groups. So if you are in Ohio, I know Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, how they function, they actually have conferences, and to where you have a lot more focused on the African-American experience because they have UMADOP. So that is something that they have in that region. Here within the greater Houston area, what I recommend is taking a look, even, you know, when I look at teen and family services, they're not servicing, you know, the alternative peer groups for adolescents. They're actually providing services in the south side of Houston. So what I would ask is for you to take a look, and I can link you with people that can give you these resources, by the way, but I would like for you to take a look at the zip codes as to where the meetings are located. And maybe you can find something maybe near the 3rd Ward, you know, even in the suburban areas, if you just reach out to those individuals that are active. But I can provide those those pieces to you all. Eric is going to receive a PDF and a list of the articles, links, the books. I will put all of that together for Eric to share with the Spiritual Care Network. And also, if anyone has any further dialogue that they would like to have with me, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I have been doing conversations with individuals and organizations on diversity since 1999. It's a passion. I love it. And the purpose behind me doing that, I just really want individuals to be able to provide the best service that they possibly can, from someone that may not look like them to someone with a disability to someone who may have a language barrier.
Awesome. Great job. Did you have any other questions, Jade, or anything to add?
No, I think it was, like everyone said, it was very powerful, very emotional. However, it's information that we all need to know, not just one race. And that's who God created us to be. He created us to dwell together in unity. And Helena, I just can't applaud you more for sharing you.
Thank you. And when I do host this training in depth, I will obviously let it be known on my social media, and I'll also share it with Jade and Eric, as they are members of the board for the Spiritual Care Network. The other thing I'd like to highlight is September is Recovery Month, but before that, we have the Texas Association for Addiction Professionals Conference coming up. And they're going to be focusing a great deal on providing, you know, the best care. I will be speaking that Saturday. I will be speaking on, obviously, a topic looking at diversity within behavioral health. So if you are interested, please, you know, consider attending. Our conferences tend to be pretty, you know, fruitful. They're fun. You make new contacts, and you also really strengthen your ability to provide better care for individuals because you're getting more and more resources. So our conference is next month. So I hope to see some of you all there.
I'll be there.
It's nice to get a hug now that, you know, many of us are vaccinated and we're able to hug, you know, and still practice some precautions. So, but I'm still taking a look, you know, looking forward to seeing you all.
Great conference. Well, once again, thanks for speaking. Before we close, Jade would like to close us in a word of prayer.
Father God, we come before you today and we thank you, Father God, for blessing us with this presentation. Thank you, God, for allowing Helena to come before everyone and educate us, Lord. We ask that you build us and continue to allow the voices to come forth to educate our communities as we see fit. God, we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 All right.
Thanks again. That concludes our webinar for today.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye.